This orientation is for the second round of our skilled events. The events on the left are the ones that work with this particular orientation. The events on the right have a significantly different second round, so they will have their own orientation video. These events take place Friday morning. The event manager and personnel begin at 8, with competitions beginning at 8:45. Please see your competitive event schedule for your room. Be prepared to run the event. This is the skilled portion only. The test portion has already been completed, so this portion will require judges. We do plan to have 2 judges per event, but you can run this with a single judge. It is okay if there are advisors that have students in these competitive events, because judges will be doing the scoring. The advisors will only be managing the event itself. In preparation for this, please make sure you print and review the event guidelines several times. I suggest highlighting the important parts. Event manager, you will attend the event orientation at 8 a.m. in headquarters, and you will actually coordinate the event. Event personnel, you will report at 8 o'clock to the event room, and you will assist with organizing and making sure the event runs smoothly. When you first arrive to your room, the first thing you will do is make sure that your room is set up the way it needs to be set up for your event. You will also orient the judges, so you do need to be very familiar with the guidelines, because you will start out with the judges while the event manager is in orientation. Your room should be set up at what's called a skilled event setup. You will have a table and chairs for judges. You'll have a table in the room for you to set and store materials. You'll have chairs and possibly a table for the advisors inside the room. You'll have a table and 2 chairs outside the room to help you organize getting students in. And then you should have a nice open area for your equipment and for the students to perform their skills. You may also have a round table and chair to the side so that a timekeeper can sit away from the judges and can sit in an area where the student can see them if they are required by their guidelines to hold up 1-minute signs or anything like that. The first thing you'll need to do is sign the confidentiality agreements. The event manager will bring these back after orientation. This is very important for us to make sure that these events are still equal and fair in the years in the future. You will be allowed to know the scenarios and scripts and that type thing that are used in this event. Please don't take pictures of those or make copies of those. And these cannot be shared until the event is completely finished. We cannot have one set of students learning what the scenario is going to be before their time actually begins. And we need to remind students that once they hear the scenario and then leave the room after their event's complete, they should not share the scenario or script with anybody else. It gives an unfair advantage to the competitors that have not entered the room yet. Advisors and students are not allowed to observe any events other than their particular assigned event during their particular competition time. Pictures cannot be taken of the events, of the skills, or of the equipment. Students cannot be allowed access into the area other than the time of their orientation or their competition. They could see something that would allow them to have an advantage, and we can't allow that. We must be consistent and fair. Scenarios and scripts cannot be removed from the secured location, and they are to be returned to headquarters when the event's complete. This is a sample of the confidentiality agreement that each advisor will sign. The event managers, when they go to headquarters for orientation, you will receive your event binder and any equipment or supplies that you need for your competitive event at that time. You'll have a list of the top 6 competitors that are teams that will be coming to you. You'll get your scenarios, your equipment, and your scripts, if scripts are needed. You'll have skill rubrics for each judge to have their own. A blank top 6 form. The judges will fill this out after all the competitors have performed. The confidentiality forms and the event survey forms. And just keep in mind the event survey is about the event only. It is not about the entirety of State Leadership Conference. If for any reason the event manager cannot attend orientation, you have to let me know as soon as possible. We have to have somebody at orientation to get any last-minute details and to pick up and sign out the equipment and the binder. Prior to coming to State Leadership Conference, please be familiar with the guidelines. We have to follow them as closely as we possibly can at State. Once the advisor returns from their orientation, your group needs to get together and you need to make a plan. The orientation for the judges really should already be started, but who is going to make sure that they have everything that they need? Who is going to review with them? How are you going to get the students in the room and call roll? Where are students going to wait for their turn? Are they going to wait in a holding area, or are you going to give appointment times? Who's going to check the dress code? Who's going to deliver the scenario? Who's going to read the script? If you need a patient for your event, you will be told that individually. The event manager will be notified that they need to have a patient prepared for their event. Who's going to time the skills, and who's going to keep the judges on schedule. The judges only have a certain amount of time to score these things, and so they have to be kept on schedule too. My suggestion is to orient the judges to the rubrics and the time limits of the event. I would do this prior to the event manager even getting there. Make sure they're familiar with the guidelines. Go over the important points of the guidelines. Review the rubrics and stress consistency. If they want to give half points, I'm fine with that, but each one of them must be doing the same thing, and we must do that for all of the students. Each judge will complete their own rubric, but once everybody's competed, they can come together and discuss it at the end. And when they're filling out the top 6, if there's a tie, they have to break the tie. They need to discuss it and figure out which competitor actually did a little bit better than the other one, and they need to break the tie. Remind them before the students come in. They cannot give suggestions. They cannot give advice to these students. They cannot tell them good job. They can tell them thank you. That's all they can do. If you are required to have a patient, orient the patient. Make sure they understand their script. Make sure they understand that they are not to supply any responses if they have not been asked by the competitor. They do not provide any information until they've been prompted. If they are supposed to act like something hurts, if the competitor moves their arm, then they don't tell them my arm hurts. They wait until the competitor moves their arm, and then they say ow, or they grimace, or they, whatever. But they are not to give information before they're prompted. Advisors, you will have to notify the judges if a competitor does not follow the guidelines. This is for things that are not on the rubric. If they're not supposed to use a particular prop or something, then you have to tell the judges that they were not supposed to do that. I would do that after the competitor exits the room. Each event room will have that table outside the door. This is a good place to check the roster and very discreetly check the dress code as the competitors are coming in the room. They're not going to have places to sit in the room, so once they come into the room, they just need to go stand in the open area. If you're checking dress code and you think that a student does not meet dress code, please do not say anything to the student. Mark it down discreetly to the side. Get with another one of your event personnel. Discreetly ask them to also look at that student's dress And then y'all come together and decide, did it meet dress code or did it not meet dress code? If you're unsure of whether or not it does because it's just that close to meeting dress code, give the student the points. Err on the side of the student. Also keep in mind that with the skilled events, most of the guidelines allow the student to wear HOSA attire or attire that works with that profession or that skill. This is at your discretion to determine if that professional dress actually works with that profession. Scrubs do not work with all events. So it is your discretion, and y'all need to make a plan for that ahead of time. Remember that you only document dress code if they do not meet it. After the students are checked in and they're all standing in the room, this is when you instruct the students on the process of the event. You know, what's the order of things? How are you going to do the event? This is not the time to give them the scenario, nor allow them to know the skills. So if you've already set out equipment, you need to cover it, or you need to wait until after they leave the room to pull the equipment out. They should only be instructed on the actual process of the event. Tell them what order they're going to compete in, or give them appointment times. It is completely up to you to decide if you're going to send them to the holding room and call them out one at a time, one right after the other, or if you're going to give them appointment times and let them go do other things in between. Completely at your discretion. If you are going to have them go to the holding area, you need to show them where that is. Now, my suggestion is that you get the cell phone number of the person that's manning the holding area so that you can just send a text and say, send me the next group, and you don't necessarily have to walk down there. Remind them that once they come in to compete, they'll get their scenario, and it's up to them to perform the skills that are needed. It's up to them to figure out the skills that are needed. They are not to share this once they exit the room. At this time, you'll answer any questions and then send them to the holding area or to leave and wait on their appointment. Let me make sure I have made the above clear, because when I talked about giving them the scenario, I want to make sure you understand that you are giving them the scenario only when their time comes to compete. During this orientation part, while they're all in there, you are just reminding them that they will get the scenario when it's their turn, and they are not to share it when they leave. Now, if you were unable to set out the equipment before they got in there, now you can set out the equipment and make sure your patient's ready if a patient's required. Call the competitors in one at a time when it's their turn. Either give them the written scenario or read the scenario to them. It is up to you which one you are going to do, but you need to do the exact same one for every competitor. At this point, the timekeeper starts keeping time for the skills. Now, a competitor can ask you to reread the scenario once if you're reading, and then the time will start after that. Remind the patient that they are to answer based on prompts. Call time if the competitor is not through when doing their skill. When the time for that skill runs out, the timekeeper calls time. Scoring stops for that skill right there. If the student needs to do a second skill for that scenario, then they need to move to that second skill now, and time starts again. You can tell them this. You can tell them, if you feel like another skill is required, start that skill now. But do not give them information that tells them whether or not another skill is required. You can thank the competitor and let them exit the room. Remind them before they exit again not to share the event information with others. You can also remind them that they will not know the final results until award session. Just for additional information, we cannot give kids suggestions for improvements. What I would ask is that if judges have some general suggestions that I can share with the entire set of advisors at the end, they are more than welcome to list that on the back of the check-in sheet, but we cannot give specific areas of improvement to specific students. If you want to orient the students to the location of things in the room, that's okay. If you want to tell them supplies that you can use are on the table, then tell them that, but you need to make sure every one of them knows this. If for any reason you make a mistake and provide information before it was asked or prompted, that's okay. Provide this information for every single competitor. Our main thing here is consistency. Consistency is what makes it equitable, and that's what we're trying to provide for these students. There are going to be obstacles that might have to be overcome. That's okay. We just need to be consistent from one competitor to the next. Some possible problems. A student or a team arrives late. If they're not there for their appointment time, you have a couple of choices. Or if they're not in the holding room when you go to call them, you have a couple of choices. Either you can go ahead and call the next competitor and move them to the end of the line, or you can hold that time open, and when they arrive, they have whatever time is left to read their scenario and complete their skills. That is completely up to you. Just decide ahead of time and be consistent. If a competitor or team does not bring equipment that the guidelines say they're supposed to have, we do not supply that equipment. If the skill that they're asked to perform requires some of that equipment, we cannot give them points for any portion of the skill that requires the equipment. They cannot verbalize that they have the equipment if they don't have it. Now, if they are unable to perform a portion of the skill with the equipment that we have provided, with the equipment that is present from us, then they can verbalize the steps that they are unable to perform. For example, if we've provided a microscope that does not have a fine adjustment knob, the students can and should verbalize this step. They can get points for it if they verbalize the step. Keep in mind our goal is to set high standards and to carry out these events with honesty and integrity that makes it equitable for all of our competitors. These are the leadership qualities that we are hoping to teach these students while they're at State Leadership Conference. We need to be the example for what we want them to learn. Conduct your event as you would want others to conduct the events for your students. We want it to be fair this year, and we want it to be fair in all future years. If a student has a grievance, again, they can bring this grievance to you. If it's something you can help with that would still be fair amongst the competitors, that's fine. If not, or it's not something you can help with, or you are unsure how to handle the grievance, then that student should be instructed to take that to their advisor, and their advisor can then decide what to do, or how to explain this to the student, or they can bring it to headquarters. But we will keep it professional and confidential. And for all advisors, we really hope that everybody keeps in mind that everybody is doing the best that they can do, but that we are human. When your event's complete, thank the judges. They have taken time out of their busy schedule. Some of them have taken time off work. We are greatly appreciative that they are coming in to help us with this. Provide them with a thank you card, which you'll find in your binder, and provide them with a judge's gift, which the event manager will pick up during orientation. Gather back up all the equipment and signs and straighten the room. Make sure the top 6 form is completed and it's legible. Complete the event survey. And then look at the check-in sheet in the event binder to make sure you have everything back in the front pocket where it's supposed to be. Put the event binder back together if you need to put the guidelines back in there or the dress code instructions back in there. And then it may take all of you to return the binder and supplies to headquarters, and we'll sign it all back in. That's what your check-in sheet will look like. Make sure that the top part is filled out. We're going to take these out and separate them so that it's easier for me to work with when I get back to the office. So I need to make sure the event and which round it is on the top. Use the checklist to make sure you have everything back where it's supposed to be. And then make sure you've answered the questions at the bottom. Use the back for any judge's suggestions. Thank you so very much for working with us to provide these events for the students. We absolutely could not do it without you.